Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel with me, Only Run Very Noob, and of course my boy Bravo back here, and we're bringing you gameplay in the classic constructed format. You guys already know what it is by now. I'm playing Bravo and analyzing my gameplay turn by turn, and today we're playing against Phi, Rising Rebellion. I think this is sort of a coin flip matchup. I think it's definitely draw dependent. Um, they have well timed reacts. They can really sort of blow you out on a turn cycle where you can't afford to be blown out like that. And on the flip side, we can sort of high roll them. Basically, all of our disruption is relevant against them. Starstruck being the big one. If we get to crush a Starstruck, they can basically only play Ravenous Rabble and E-Strike. But if we do more than just crush for 4 with Starstruck, they're basically just passing the turn, which is, of course, very good. In this matchup, I definitely like to be aggressive. I used to sort of have a slow plan, like kind of grindy with the Titan's Fist, Steel Braid Buckler, and I would bring Sigil of Solace. I would bring like 63 cards. I would bring all of the Fate for Scenes and Sink Belows. And that strategy is like okay. I feel like that strategy's very good into Phis that aren't quite as experienced and that are on Kodachi. But if Phi is on Emberblade and they know how to just buy back a Phoenix Flame at the end of your, or like during your turn, and then during their turn they buy back a Phoenix Flame as well, and then go 0-3-2 without fatiguing themselves any cards. Obviously, they play the first Phoenix Flame for 0, turns on their Emberblade, go again, and then the second Phoenix Flame gets 2, thanks to their Shuko. You're just like never fatiguing that, not in a million years. I know intuitively it seems like it would be harder to fatigue Kodachis than Emberblade, but because of that sort of endgame state that they can just do over and over and over and over, it's actually a lot harder to fatigue Emberblade. Not to mention, it just does a little bit more damage. Like, it's easier to block Emberblade for 3 with a 3 block, but even when we're fatiguing Kodachis, we have to be resolving Crippling Crush on occasion off of like 2 blues and a Surge. You can't just fatigue them through blocking. You have to like fatigue them through damage as well. So, if you have that same plan into Emberblade and you really want to Crippling Crush them, you might end up just like not even blocking the Emberblade, trying to Crippling Crush them, and you take like an extra point of damage over Kodachis there. I'm still on this triple unmovable deck. I've been really liking this list. It's been fantastic. And the matchups I don't run unmovable, like it feels basically the same. But in the matchups where you do want run unmovable, it's like having 3 of them is so insane. Like against Azalea or the Mirror, having 3 red unmovables just feels so good. Like so good. But against Phi, I sideboard out Zealous Belting, Sigil of Solace, Red Unmovable, Pulverize, and 2 Fate Foreseen. The Fate Foreseens are pretty good, but I want to be lean at exactly 60 because I want to be rolling Disruption and playing an aggressive plan, and I want all 3 of my pummels when I'm doing an aggressive plan. So 2 of the Fate Foreseens got to be out. I have 1 Fate Foreseen in over the Pulverize just because if they are on Kodachi, Pulverize is kind of just 14 damage, and you don't really get an on-hit effect because you just make one of their Kodachis like 0 instead of 1. Of course, it's still like a ton of damage for like racing, but it seems like it's a little clunky, not really worth it. On turn 0, if you tutor up an attack with Showtime, like you're fairly happy to just make a Surge and tutor up a Crippling Crush. So yeah, let's get right into this game. And the equipment loadout is pretty simple. We just don't run Null Rune and run everything else. As we can see, they're on Emberblade and Mask of Momentum. I think this will be fairly common. You won't see a ton of Link's helmet, but you'll see it sometimes. And I feel like it's a toss-up between Kodachi's or Emberblade. Like they're both very popular. This hand, not great, but we're going second, so hopefully we get to block. Unfortunately, it has a blue unmovable in it, so we might have to block with our only threat, which is the Command and Conquer. A lot of times they just try to attack and leak damage here, so we're just going to block as much as possible. The matchup's so close that you can't be leaking damage at the very beginning to hold a threat, especially a threat like Command and Conquer. Maybe a Crippling Crush you would hold, but not here. So as you see, I don't even attempt to block with the other blue and keep Command and Conquer just in case. I just block with Command and Conquer because they might E-Strike, draw a card here, and then we could play Unmovable. They might Snatch, or they might do anything that's worth more than 3 points. And if they do that, I just want to play the Unmovable instead of block 3. If they look for Phoenix Flame, we're just going to end up taking that 1 damage. We're not going to block that. Same thing with Kodachi. If they have Kodachis, you usually just take the first Kodachi hit. So here we do see a Blaze Headlong for 4, and I am just going to play the Unmovable. Kind of cross my fingers and hope that they don't have like Snatch in hand. But yeah, if I just blocked 3 and took 1, maybe they wouldn't play the Snatch because we have 1 card left, but they probably would because it would still trigger. And since it's unmovable, like, we would actually just end up taking more damage. So Snatch is bad for us either way here. We just kind of have to hope they don't have it. Luckily, we didn't have to block with any big threats. And here, we're just going to Command and Conquer them. Maybe hope that they're a little bit afraid of Pummel, although I don't think they could do anything about it even if we had Pummel. So they're probably just going to end up blocking 6 or taking 6 and giving us their arsenal. And we are going to heave this Thunderquake. Heaving Thunderquake is like fine when you have Crown of Providence up. With a surge that we made and a heaved Thunderquake, we'll have 4 surges, which means we could 1 blue play a Crippling Crush like we see here. We even have a Pummel, so like if we want to take a bunch of damage, we could like pummel a Crippling Crush, although I think that might be a little bit wild. I'm just going to take the first hit. Generally the first hit is the one you want to take the most because you want to stop Mask of Momentum. I'm just going to end up taking this one as well, hoping that they come in with Double Strike for 2 that we can block with our Crown of Providence and get rid of Thunderquake and reevaluate our hand to see how we want to block, or if we maybe do want to dominate and pummel a Crippling Crush. Because Crippling Crush costs 3. Then we could make a Surge and dominate with one of our blues and then play a pummel with our 3rd blue, which is actually kind of nasty and something I am sort of looking to want to do here. They just pass the turn, so we don't even have to take like any extra damage here to make a Surge, activate a hero, play Crippling Crush, and then pummel the Crippling Crush. Because that costs what, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we have 3 blues. So that is quite nasty. We might even like bait defense reactions. So they just pass priority. And as you can see, I go to cast my pummel immediately, I think. Oh, no, I don't. So I was just going to talk about this, that I don't think I should play my pummel here. I think I should just like let them use defense reactions first. And if they choose to not use defense reactions, I think just taking 11 and arsenaling our pummel is fine here. Because I feel like they're going to use defense reactions. Oh, but I end up just pummeling. It looked like I was going to pummel and then going to pass. Maybe I was thinking about that in this game. Um, but now they just can't do anything, basically. So they do have the sink below from hand. And if they have a sink below in Arsenal, I don't think they would use it. Oh, that's interesting. They don't let the sink resolve. They just play a Fate Foreseen. But that means the sink below is not going to resolve here. Um, they have a sink below in Arsenal too. But they're not going to be able to... Only one of these defense reactions is going to resolve because of Dominate, of course. A little interesting. I mean, I guess they were going to discard it to Crippling Crush and Pummel anyway. Oh, and now they're like undoing. But yeah, I believe there's new defense dominate rules that like let you play multiple defense reactions from hand as long as you don't let them resolve. For whatever reason, you might want to do that. Maybe something like what's that arrow that like it's for 6 and when it hits you, you discard cards from your hand and take damage if they're not action cards. Like maybe there's that. It looks like he's typing. He said thinks there's a bug. I say what bug? He says you can't tell. Look at my hand. I'm explaining to him that my attack has Dominate, but reactions aren't considered blocking until resolution. So you can technically play as many as you want, I believe, but they won't resolve. So we're just having a little aside here. So we revert the turn, blah blah blah. This Command and Conquer, Crippling Crush gets played and gets pummeled. He plays one, plays another from Arsenal. Although I'm not sure why he would play it from Arsenal. Like, I feel like them having a sink below in Arsenal is more valuable than like the 4 life this represents, because right now it's not doing anything other than gaining him 4 life, where in the future it might actually stop him from getting like a future crush effect, right? So yeah, all that happens. He takes all that damage and sends it right back because he has no cards, and we immediately punish him for playing that sink below by having a Terra Sunder turn. If he was at 23 but had a sink below in Arsenal, I think it would be a lot better for him than being at 27 here and not being able to stop our Anothos. So they just take 7 to discard 2 and keep a 2-card hand. We get to Arsenal sink below. We're kind of rolling this game. We're up 14 life already. It's only been like 3 turns. And we have a sink below in Arsenal too. So we get to sort of stymie a whole bunch of his offense. And if we draw more disruption in the next couple turns, he's almost certainly super like too far behind to get back in this game. As you can see, like a high roll out of Bravo doesn't necessarily need to be like 4 or 5 turns of disruption in a row. Sometimes you just get 2 in a row, and it's just so much damage that they can't really do a lot about it. I'm just going to rewind because they play a blue Soulbead Strike. So like, what did they discard to the Terra Sunder? They discard a blue Soulbead Strike and a Stab Wound. So it looks like they just had like a ton of blues in their hand. Which is obviously not very good for them. Sort of makes me think they should have just like blocked 3 instead of sending 2 with a Soulbead Strike here. But I do believe I'm going to block with Sink Below still, so that I can send a Crippling Crush, or a Spinal Crush, an Arsenal Spinal Crush. Or do I just want to block with like Equipment and then dominate a Spinal Crush? Saving the Sink Below? I think both of those are reasonable lines, but I think just playing a threat and arsenaling a threat is usually what you want to be doing against Fi. And to do that, we have to clear our arsenal of the Sink Below. Plus, we kind of don't want this to hit just in case he has like another blue attack. Like, it'll be a card he really doesn't want in Arsenal. But he does want the card in Arsenal. I could imagine it being like another Sink Below or Favor Scene, because we've already seen both of those out of his deck. And he could just be playing like the full 6. Not dominating a Spinal is still fine. It's going to demand 2 cards or armor. And shrinking Fi's hand is definitely very good. It makes Mask of Momentum a lot easier to stop. It makes the damage they can output a lot more calculable. Like, if they only have 2 cards, basically they're sending 7, right? They can play like 3 Go Again, pitch a blue for Searing Emberblade for 3 Go Again, use the 1 floating to get Phoenix Flame back with the hero ability. Ooh, it looks like they don't even have 2/3 blocks, so we get 2 cards and armor, and we are flying this game. So we have a Spinal Crush in Arsenal, we have a Crippling Crush in hand, and 3 blues. And they send a Command and Conquer at us, which is actually incredibly annoying here. I would like to just block with 1 card from hand and send Crippling Crush undominated. Maybe I would want to dominate the Spinal Crush, though, because odds of this Arsenal card being a defense reaction are fairly low. They would have just used it last turn, right, instead of giving us 2 cards plus armor. So we can almost... I mean, I don't want to say almost guarantee, but like it would be very weird for this to be a defense reaction. Like the way they played their last turn cycle, we can almost just assume this isn't a defense reaction. And if they surprise us with this being a defense reaction, then I guess like they got us. But the way they played their last turn, I just don't think they would save a defense reaction. I think they would just like give us armor plus defense reaction and come in with their Flame Call Awakening and Salt the Wound and whatever else they blocked with. So how are we dealing with this Command and Conquer here? This is actually really annoying, and I don't think we can make it out of this without giving up substantial resources. So we could just block 6. We could just block 6 with Crippling Crush and a blue and dominate the Spinal and hope to keep ripping big dominated threat or like big disruptive threats off the top. I don't really like that though. Crippling Crush is like our best card against Fi. We could just get hit for 6, losing our Spinal Crush. Throwing Crippling Crush off Debilitate and Rouse the Ancients, arsenaling the Terra Sunder so that we do sort of get to keep like a disruptive piece for next turn. We could take 6, lose our Spinal, and then like Rouse the Ancients, arsenaling the Crippling Crush, just pressuring their life total because we're up like 16 life. Or instead of rousing them, we could just dominate the Crippling Crush. Of course, losing the Spinal. But we could also just block with Rouse the Ancients in our gloves and our chest for 6. And that leaves us with Spinal Crush and Crippling Crush. Both of which I think are slightly better than Terra Sunder. Of course, they do have 3 armor they could give us without giving us the mask. So 3 block from hand and 3 armor sort of stops Spinal Crush, where it doesn't stop Terra Sunder. So this is actually a really sort of a unique spot that's kind of tough. Like I feel like I just listed off like 6 different lines, and honestly I think all of them are reasonable. Bravo definitely doesn't have a lot of turns where that's the case. So out of all those reasonable lines, what's best? I think not letting Command and Conquer hit is better than letting it hit. So that already like negates 3 or 4 of those lines. And I think I do just want to give him armor and arouse the ancients. Keeping Spinal Crush and Crippling Crush as threats. But not even sure if I want to dominate Spinal or just throw Crippling. I think dominate Spinal could be slightly better because we've put him on not a defense reaction arsenal. And a dominated Spinal either eats up the rest of his armor, making our follow-up Crippling Crush a lot harder for him to deal with. But if we just throw a naked Crippling Crush, like, it's also going to buy us enough time to play our Spinal Crush. The issue is with a Surge, like, I think Crippling Crush is more efficient. Because if we don't get to keep 3, like, if we dominate the Spinal and don't get to remake a Surge, we sort of have to keep 3 cards to Crippling Crush them, where we can 2-card Crippling Crush, pitch 2 cards to Crippling Crush them here, and next turn, if we have to block with 2 cards, we could still Spinal Crush them just without Dominate. So as you can see, I'm Crippling Crushing here. I think it's just a little bit more efficient, because next turn we can still block 6 and send Spinal undominated, where if we dominated the Spinal, we wouldn't be able to send Crippling with 2 cards no matter what we want next turn. Sort of interesting. But we do get 2 cards from hand and armor, and we get to deal another 3 damage. Certainly becoming more of a factor here. Like, if they're stopping our crush effect, cool. But they're at 15 and we're at 34, and they can't just be taking 3 damage a turn and then having small turns back. Like, we're gonna beat them that way just with damage, not even with disruption. We sort of draw another heater. I would really like to just block with this Spinal Crush, keep 2 blues, make a Surge, throw Spinal, the Spinal and Arsenal, and then Arsenal or Crippling Crush. And with them having a 3-card hand, I think we'll probably be able to do that quite easily. Hopefully 1 card plus armor can like turn off his Mask of Momentum and leave us with the 2 blues and the Crippling Crush in hand to enact the plan we want to enact. I feel like this game we're just like way ahead of our Phi opponent. Next turn we're going to be able to throw a Disruptive Threat and Arsenal a Disruptive Threat, and I think just that alone is already going to be like too much. They pitch a blue to buy back a Phoenix Flame and hit us for 0. And then as we can see here, their Arsenal card was another blue attack. I don't know if you remember a couple turns ago, we blocked their Soulbead Strike blue, just being like, well, they might have another blue attack that they don't want to Arsenal. And they did, and they still chose to Arsenal it. So we're just like super far ahead at this point. They literally just sent like a 2-card 2 damage at us, which isn't going to be enough, let me tell you. And then yeah, we get to block with Spinal. They play a Snatch. We get to block with Spinal Crush plus an armor. Just turn off their Arsenal, and then make a Surge and throw Spinal Crush. Keeping a Crippling for Arsenal, so very, very, very difficult for this Phi to get out from under this, I believe. Even if we don't draw another Disruptive Threat for the rest of the game, like blocking 6 and sending 6 with Hammer is probably just going to be good enough after our Crippling Crush that we're Arsenaling. And even if they have 2/3 blocks to block this for 6, they just take 3 down to 12 and have a 2-card hand, which with Ember Blade is basically just dealing 7 damage at most, barring any sort of like Snapdragon Scalers nonsense. Ooh, and they don't even have 2/3 blocks. They're just, it looks like they're just blocking for 5 here. So they're not going to go again. Funnily enough, if they have Enlightened Strike, it's still just like a 2-card 7, like they were going to do before. They send 3. It doesn't have go again because of Spinal Crush. We're just going to block 3 because we have 4 blues, and then we get to dominate this Crippling Crush in Arsenal. Because we have a Surge, we also get to make a Surge, which could be nice if we draw our remaining Crippling Crush, or if we draw like Starstruck. They're giving us armor and a card. It doesn't even stop the crush effect. I think they're probably just sort of checking out of this game at this point. They attack with Searing Emberblade for 3. I'm just going to block 3 and then send Chokeslam back for 8 off of the Surge. I could have blocked with Sink Below and then like dominated Chokeslam, but I don't really need to dominate it. I can just deal damage, pull cards from their hand. The life totals are just way too lopsided for our Fi to get anything going here. Just swinging Hammer for 6 would be enough to win this game, I think. They block with 1 card, going down to 2. Chokeslam is active, so that turns off a lot of their scary stuff, like Salt the Wound or Lava Burst. Or even Art of War, if they're running Art of War into us. But with them at 2, we could basically take whatever line we want. I'm just going to block this with a defense reaction from Arsenal. I'm not going to sink, because if I can dominate this Starstruck, he's almost guaranteed to die. Even defense reaction, Arsenal and defense reaction in hand would only block 8, and Starstruck would end up dealing 2. Just take 4 here. And then, yeah, dominate Starstruck for the win. This game went amazingly well for us and fairly poorly for the Fi. There was a turn, I want to say turn 2 or turn 3, where they had a 4 blue hand, and for some reason they just took Terra Sunder instead of blocking and like moving on. I think they probably should have blocked to save 3 life, since the 2 remaining blues in their hand just weren't going to do anything anyway. They didn't even have go again. Soulbeat Strike only has go again if it hits, and then the blue Lava Vein Loyalty or whatever it was doesn't have go again because they don't have 2 Draconic Chain Links. So this is definitely one of the easier ways to beat Fi. Draw very good, and don't let Fi do anything. Like, as you can see in this game, we just destroyed their hand like turn after turn. We got ahead on life, so that even if we drew a bad hand, we could just like block and hammer them, and it would be a hammer that was worth blocking for Fi. And when Fi starts blocking your hammer, usually means they're losing. Like, if they have to start blocking your hammer and you're at a comfortable life, I'm not really sure what they can do. I think this matchup is actually really close. I think when both players know what they're doing in the matchup, it's basically 50-50. But it is very draw dependent, and I think it's more draw dependent on Bravo's side than Fi's side. Like, sure, Fi can have well-timed defense reactions, but if Bravo in the early game just has like no disruption, the Fi can just like tee off and have a lot of damage against you, and you're not doing much against them other than blocking 6, sending 6. And that's just not good enough when you're at parity, right? Like, if you're both starting at 40 and you're blocking 6 and hammering for 6 like 2 turns in a row, Fi is going to be licking their chops with or without a defense reaction, right? So always be on the lookout in this matchup. Always be on the lookout for disruption. Always be willing to take a little extra damage if it means you get to throw disruption this turn and arsenal disruption. And don't let their mask trigger. Like if their mask triggers, that's generally very bad. It's when what's normally an incredibly close matchup, I don't think you can be giving them a free card like ever. I don't think mask can ever trigger. Maybe that's a reason for Fi to run pouncing links, but with like double strike and Kodachis and stuff, I think the threat of mask of momentum is better. But maybe with Emberblade, links is better because we can't stop you from hitting us, but we can stop you from masking us. Many of my games against Fi, they don't trigger Mask of Momentum even once. And that's definitely a conscious effort from Bravo's side to not let that card trigger, even if it means you're blocking like a Phoenix Flame for 1 with a full card from hand. So hopefully this was a fun one. Hopefully we learned a little bit, even though the game wasn't that difficult from Bravo's side. Always like analyzing my gameplay and looking to see if there's any mistakes I made. And just sort of thinking about the game plan and showing it to you guys. So I hope the next time you play Fi, you draw as well as I did this game, and maybe even have time for a little snack in between rounds. But yeah, until next time.